Coffee with Toffees.
Let's do this!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome back to a brand new, I know, shocking episode of Coffee with Toffees. It is a Coffee with Toffees podcast. For those of you who have been listening to our other shows recently, this is where it all came from. We've got some new partners and some new exciting content for you coming out in the following weeks, months, hopefully years. We'll sort of see where it takes us. But the Coffee with Toffees conversational format is back, and I'm super excited. I got a good first guest for us here tonight to talk about the state of workshop Valve and what it's like to create the things that we wear every day when we play. But before we do that, let's talk about why I'm able to be here. So a big shout out to the sponsors who make this possible. Number one, you might notice some new overlays, some new stuff going on here. That is because Unicorn approached me. They know that I used to enjoy, before I started Dota, betting on Dota. And then once I became a personality, I felt it was unethical to bet because, say, I might know if a team is suffering from the flu when somebody else wouldn't. But they came to me and said, we have play money. We think you'd have a ton of fun to just play on the site without actually betting on the site. For real cash, if that makes sense. So I said, sure. We liked hanging out, so they made some overlays for us, and they are the new sponsors of the show. So welcome, guys. The regulated and legal betting is their MO. You can only join the site if you're of legal age. So for those of you who are under 21 or 18, I believe, don't bother yet. But I'm sure the time will come. Also, Razer and Asus Republica Gamers for the equipment that we use to run the show. Big shout out to those guys. My name's Toffees. If you don't know me, get comfortable because we're going to spend some time together. You can find me at Toffees TV if you're interested for more. But the real star, the person that I brought here today with the intention of talking in-depthly about some stuff that I would say is behind the scenes for a lot of folks, but still really in our face, is my guest. Her name is Shaylin Ham. She goes by Chemical Aaliyah, and she is a workshop artist. She has designed a bunch of different sets. I'll have her go over some of her favorites for you. But she really did Team Fortress, from what I understand initially, moved to Dota 2. Was actually a huge name from some of these sets. When she talks about these sets and couriers, you're going to go, oh yeah, I love that courier. For a couple of TIs, and then I think has moved a little bit towards CSGO in recent years. And we're going to talk about why that is. Why is Dota 2, and this is just a guess, Shaylin, you can correct me when we start talking. Why is Dota 2 losing some of their best artists to other games? And how do we keep that from happening? So Shaylin, how are you doing tonight?
Well, I'm doing pretty well, thanks.
No problem. I can't complain. I got a nice cup of coffee. I lost all of my promotional mugs, so just have a banana mug. That's I'm not even sure where I got a banana mug, but hey, I think it's cool.
It's important that you have one.
It is important. It's important that I have coffee. That I think is the key here. So before we get to the meat and potatoes of Valve and Workshop and all this other stuff, I want to talk about the past a little bit, sort of set up for our viewers who you are, where you come from, and why it is that we deserve to hear what you have to say about the Valve Workshop, if that makes sense. Okay. So you have a lot of sets in the game already. Do you have any idea how many sets, and we'll count a courier as a set since it's sort of its individual item?
Oh my god.
If you had to guess.
Prepared. A lot. I don't know, a bunch. I mean, I've been doing the Dota stuff since 2012, actually, which is like longer than any job that I've ever had, like an actual job.
That's pretty cool.
So,
are we talking
and
tens, 50s, hundreds?
A few thousand, probably.
What?
I don't know. I have
wow.
I don't know. Maybe there's probably more than a dozen. That's a good question. I don't really keep track of these things.
Because you were also designing back when commons existed and uncommons and things like that, right? When we were...
Oh, right. Things were completely different when there were like keys that you actually like bought the key and it would open the chest.
And you got items, not sets necessarily. It was a very different place, guys. For those of you who are new to Dota.
It was more like TF2, I think originally. It's what it felt like.
Yeah, very much so. It felt like a blend of sort of TF2 and CS:GO's chests now. So a lot's in there. Do you have a favorite set or courier, one or two that you think fondly back on, or that had made you copious amounts of money?
Courier-wise, I guess Coral the furry fish was really cute. That's probably my favorite courier. And set wise, I really like at the time. I don't really like it so much anymore, but at the time, I really liked the Ice 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 Timbersaw set, the Timberthal set. That was like it. I don't know. I mean, it feels really 2014 to me now, but at the time, I thought it was pretty hilarious that we got to make that, and so it's still kind of fondly remembered in my heart.
Can I ask you what single item or set has grossed you the largest amount since you? Because I mean, some of that perpetual, I would assume, money continues to come in if you get it purchased.
I suppose it's probably, and this is just like a random thing, but the Spectre set that I had made for the new Bloom a couple years ago that was used in the TI5 compendium chest might be the top selling. But then again, there was, the sales for those things, like, they were like one and done. Right. Whereas maybe other things, I think that was probably the best selling one. But it's like not necessarily the set that I'm like, wow, that's the coolest one I made. It's kind of just random what ends up making more money than others.
Well, I think that's the way that anybody who's been in business can tell you that. I've released products, so I was like, this is a big winner, and then you're like, oh, well, I guess it didn't go as well as I thought it would. But everybody liked that really crappy thing, or, well, not crappy, I should say, the less popular thing that I didn't enjoy as much. That's it. So we know you've got sets in the game. You started working, from what I understand from some previous interviews, you started working with a gentleman named Dry Socket. I doubt that's his legal name. However,
not yet.
That was around TI4, and before that, from what I heard in the interview, you'd worked at an office job with Dry Socket prior to doing Dota 2 stuff together. Is that true?
Yes, there's some truth in those sentences there. So back when I was still doing TF2 things, I was working at Gearbox Software at the time, and back when, because I did like TF2 since the origin of the TF2 workshop as well. I've just been doing this for a really long time, back in like 2010, and so he was my office mate at the time, and he was always really interested in that, but I didn't do a lot of TF2 after that, like at least not workshop wise. And then when Dota, the opportunity to start with the Dota workshop came along, he was like, ooh, maybe this is something I'd like to do in the future. And it was actually during TI2 that we first teamed up.
Oh, wow.
So what happened was, because there still weren't very many workshop artists back then. It was like me and like Vlad the Implier and like just a couple people, like most of whom like aren't really even still doing it. And there was a Valve guy who he did a lot of work with making the workshop, and he was just like, can you make something in like a couple weeks, like a bunch of singles for the TI2 chess, because we just need content for that. And I guess Vlad was going to do like the other one, so there were like two treasures that ended up being released with that. And he's like, maybe you could work with that friend of yours who because he had made like one set on his own before that, and so what we ended up doing was, since like we had like not very much time and I was like on vacation, like visiting family, when I got back, he was my neighbor like across the hall in our apartment complex. So he just like took his laptop and like brought it into my living room, and we just like worked after work like cool. Until like 2 or 3 o'clock, like every day, until we had everything done. So it was like, that was like my first like real collaboration with Wes or Dry Socket. And but since we spent all day like in our office together, like working on our work, so it kind of made sense, because we were discussing it a lot, and so we were able to sort of brainstorm some of our ideas together. So it just really made a lot of sense. And we had a similar style, and so it was just fun to like sort of collaborate with someone, because you don't typically get to do that with art, especially not with game art, not in the same way as what we've been able to do.
Right. Yeah. No. Totally. I don't think Van Gogh would say that he had many people working on his art, on his pieces with him.
Just his interns who did all of who painted all of the hands for him.
There you go. See, that's what I guarantee she has a little art history background. I don't, but that's good information. So I thought I was going to find out that you guys had designed your first set on company time, but it sounds like you were grinding cosmetic design the way that I try to grind MMR.
Yeah, that's why I have so little time like in video games. Like ever since I've been in the industry, like I just don't have time to play any games.
It's well, you know
It was
what?
especially true back then.
I think that
Having to-
any person you ask in the industry would tell you the same thing. Every caster I know, every personality I know, every host I know says the second I started getting work, I had to really figure out when do I play because of how busy we stay. So that's pretty cool. Now, do you still work with Dry Socket at all?
So, as of probably just since 2017, not really. I mean, maybe we'll get a chance to do a couple things here and there, but he's kind of moved on from the workshop and has pursued other, career
options
things. And I'm, I'm still trying to stick it out as much as I can, but for the most part now, I'm kind of just doing it on my own. Yeah.
Okay. So now before we get into the part where you said I'm sticking it out as much as I can, because I think that that's sort of the key of where we're going with this, is the fact that our artists have gone from excitement about grinding it out for a week to get a chest in the game to, is it worth putting the time into this next piece? You did an interview with Slacks at TI5, and this is something that I was curious about when I watched this, and that's where you said you don't have much time to play. You and Dry Socket at the time were so busy making gear that you just focused on that and didn't actually get to play Dota. I think he even made a comment about how you have trouble moving the camera and you didn't understand the boots so much as just matching them to the hero. So if you were playing a purple hero, you got phase boots because it just made sense. My question is, clearly, if you're not playing that much, how you may not be as comfortable with the lore of the game. Did lore figure into your designs, or how did you guys decide on that?
I mean, really, actually, the lore was one of the things that I probably knew the most about.
Oh, cool.
One of the other main reasons why I couldn't really play the game too much is until, just recently, I've had a lot of issues with my wrist from when I was in the Army, and I've had, lots of surgeries and stuff. So using the mouse was always really painful for me. So, I was just I can't do these, really hardcore, mouse aimy type, reaction games. It was just kind of, uncomfortable for me. So I would kind of get into Dota through however I could, which was the lore of the game, which is really fun, and I liked even just reading about the heroes and whenever we would come up with ideas for our sets, we tried to come up with something that fit the hero. For example, if it was a humorous character, we would love to try to do something funny, like if it's Timber Saw, for example. I'd love to kind of just go nuts with it. If you're doing Invoker, he's super serious, so you want to try to you kind of want to tailor it to them, how their personality is, or do something that's really out there. And actually even that approach has changed over the years as well, because the longer the game is in existence, the more cosmetics there are, and then therefore you kind of have to start pushing the boundaries. Otherwise, we'll just keep seeing more or less the same things over and over and over again, and it'll get very stale. So I try to factor in all of those different things. Something else that I like to keep in mind is, suppose there's a hero that has 47 sets.
Yeah.
And at that point, I feel it's important to try to think of things that would make the set worth adding, because if everyone already has their favorite set, why make another one that's so similar? I just don't really feel it's it's with some of those older heroes necessarily worth worth going through all the trouble of making something unless it's going to be drastically different. But then we have a lot of new heroes that are coming out who have not received any sets yet, so you kind of want to just play it by ear and just look at a combination of the lore and what personally you find interesting to work on, and what would be most appropriate to make. It's a bunch of different things, but it's usually not that. It's not a scientific process. It's sort of that'd be neat.
All right, so my last question about your process before we go into sort of the business side of things is, in 2013-ish, there was a game called Dragon's Crown that came out. And you were so annoyed about it that you actually got on their forums, I guess, and tore the designer Kamitani apart. And you said, so this got published. It was so visceral that VentureBeat took it from the forum post and put it into their publication about the game. And it said, some juvenile delinquent kid in my 5th grade class used to draw girls that looked like that, only without the creepy, blank, featureless, same faces and wizard hats. I think he was actually better at it than Kamatani. I also think he's in jail now. So, pretty hardcore, but I guess that sort of sums up your feelings about maybe how women are portrayed in video games traditionally. Did you try to take those feelings into account when you designed your sets? Like, did you ever try to design female sets that were maybe a little less sexualized, or did it really bother you?
Well, it's funny because I feel like that was like a really off the cuff comment that I had made on a forum that I didn't think anyone, like, I actually had very little stake in anything about that game. Like, it's not the kind of game that I play. It wasn't. It's funny because in retrospect, it wasn't like the boobs or anything that I found so weird about it. It was like a combination of like, I guess like for me, like when I like to create art, like the facial features conveys a lot of personality, and that's kind of like what I'm drawn to, is just seeing like what makes a person. And it was what I found a little off-putting about it was just I guess we would call it the same face.
Yeah.
And it looks very like, it was like a combination of that, like the really young looking face that like just didn't look right, like with the, like, it was just like a really weird feeling that I got. And the thing is, it really did. There was this kid in my 5th grade class, and he threw pudding in my hair on the bus. And one day, and I was I came home crying, and it turns out his my mom worked for juvenile detention, or probation rather, and one of his probation officer like knew me, and so he like pulled him aside, and he was like, you got to watch out for Shaylin, or I'm going to hold you personally accountable for anything that happens to her. And so after that point, he was like, oh no, I got to like, be really nice to Shaylin. And so like he would show me his drawings, and like he was actually really, like, I think he had a lot of talent. I don't really know whatever happened to Joey, but yeah, he would draw like really, like he was like 10, but he was like drawing these like amazing pictures of like bimbos with like huge boobs. And, like, that's just what and the shading was great. So it kind of like, it really reminded me of that. So I just thought I was being hilarious. I did not really mean it to be taken that seriously, because like I said, if I actually meant to critique the artwork in a serious way, I would have a lot more I don't know, just meaningful comments. So,
fair enough. Okay, well, I was curious because it was such a fun comment. I was like, I gotta share this.
I used to be like a huge like forum troll. Like I used to run a Super Mario Brothers forum, and we used to do forum wars, and so I used to be like a real smart ass and just like say a bunch of stupid things. And I guess I just wasn't really prepared that like anybody at that time would have like cared what I had to say about something that was like obviously kind of facetious. So it was just I guess it was kind of annoying in retrospect. I just really watch it now. Like I try not to. I don't really go on forums anymore. I just like, I'd love to talk, like have real discussions about like art, critiquing art, like talking about art, like, but I just don't really. I don't know. I just feel like a lot of people can, even if I'm being serious, and I'm not being like so hyper. Like people sometimes try to take things out of context, or like it's easy to say like, oh, you don't want to see boobs on women in video games because you made this comment. Just not I don't really think that's true. Like it's all about the context of a character's personality, and like I just like variations and variety, and there's a time and a place for everything.
So for you as an artist, it's most important to focus on the type of character that you're working on, and create something that sort of puts that forward. Is what it sounds like. I mean, I could be wrong.
Yeah, so, and what I like about Dota in particular is, I mean, there's a little bit of everything. Like, you can do a sexy hero, you can do a dragon lady hero, you can do, like, a fat dude hero. Like, there's so much variety, so it's just, there's just so much to work with.
Okay. Well, let's get to, since you liked doing Dota and you're not doing as much Dota, let's talk about this. According to a gentleman named Good Boy, who released a YouTube video in sort of response to a Reddit thread that came out on the forums, he said that there was a point where artists weren't even getting paid, like they were getting their items into battle passes as a reward and not being paid for that at all. So there's been that. There's a lot of Reddit posts, stuff about changes in payouts, and that's been pushing artists out. Can you give me just an idea straight from a designer's mouth who's been in the game a long time? What has changed that's making it so much harder for artists to be involved?
It's kind of hard to pinpoint. I feel like there's a lot of, in a way, there's a lot of small things that have made it feel different over the past few years, and I mean, okay, so directly with the battle pass stuff, I mean, I'm probably not the best person to try to explain all of this, but I know that I think what he was probably referring to is just the fact that in the past the artists received because Valve takes an extra percentage of our revenue if our work is sold for the majors, but that was kind of made up again by the sales of the battle pass. And I think what they were referring to is the fact that post I think it's starting fall 2016, the fall major, they took the additional cut as was usual, which we had expected, but then we didn't receive anything from the battle pass.
I gotcha.
So we in effect received less sales, and what I guess the issue is that a lot of people don't buy the chests. They just get the chests, or they just get the cosmetics through the battle pass. They just unlock them, and so that eats into what would have been in the past money that we would have received, and we don't really know the reason why that has changed. We can only really speculate, so it's really hard to comment on that. But I mean, it is what it is, and I don't really know that it will change. Although it would be nice if it did. Ideally, what I would like to see, if it's not going to change, is more opportunities for chests in between the majors, especially now that there's only like 3 per year. It's kind of hard to put all of your eggs in one basket and just hope that like you can make a bunch of stuff and just cross your fingers that you get something in a major, because if you don't, it's going to be like another 6 months or more, until you have a chance of making money again. And especially considering another change that's kind of made it harder for artists like me who were doing this full time, compared to in the past, is once that major is over, the sales are gone, it's done. Whereas, we were able to
get
build
residuals.
Up, because I used to have like 90% of my stuff was in the game. So even if it wasn't in a super successful chest, you'd still see sales, and then there would be like the nested cash at the end of the year, which the first one of those was, it sold really well because that year I think there were a lot of particle effects and cool little custom things. So that was back in the day, like when, there was still a lot of that going on, like before there were so many immortals and arcanas and stuff. So, I mean, everything sort of is changing. Everything evolves. Like the same thing happened with TF2 and with Dota. I mean, we can't just keep doing the same. We can't keep monetizing things the exact same way and hope that it'll always be profitable. And I mean, perhaps Valve is, responding to their own concerns with, keeping the game afloat, or who knows what it is. But I mean, my main concern is that there'll still be talent to, to make high quality stuff, because I think there's still a lot of life left in this game, and I think that it should have many years of success, and that's what I really want to see. And so if there's anything I can do to try to help that, or suggestions that I could make to maybe like make things a little easier for the artists, or maybe even improve like the usability of the workshop, like just browsing or anything at all, like I'd love to offer my feedback, or I just I really want to make sure that the workshop is still a thing, because it's like one of the coolest things out there that an artist can do. And
even if a player's not involved with it, it's still part of their daily gaming life in terms of what they see. Now, you brought something up, which was the Arcanas and the Immortals. So that was a question that I had, just even as a player so I'm a Crystal Maiden player. That's one of my go-to heroes, rest in peace after this last patch. That said, she is at a point right now where there is one item slot on her that is not, if you bought the Arcanas and the Immortals, which I have because I play her so much, that is not sparkly, shiny, and crazy. So the question that I have is, as I looked at that, I said, well, there's a spot for one more artist to make something shiny for her. And after that, I don't see myself spending money on Crystal Maiden because, well, she looks like already looks like a UFO flying across the screen. Is it becoming more, is the proliferation of Immortals and Arcanas in every single one of these events making it more difficult to come up with content? And do you think that creates sort of an end game for artists?
And this is just my opinion, but I do feel that, yes, it does make things a little bit difficult because, well, it's sort of like the theory that, like, you can add things, but you can't really take a step back without people noticing that something isn't as cool as what something was in the past. And so even back in like 2014, that year, we saw a lot of custom content coming from the workshop. And I mean, that used to be something that was, very common. And if anything, maybe there was a little bit too much. Like everything had particle effects. I don't know why. Like maybe it would have been good to rein it in, but it's ever since like Source 2 workshop tools came out, nothing. Like we don't, no custom animations, no, we can't do like ultimates, we can't do particle effects or anything like that. And we have seen a lot of immortals in the past couple years and arcanas. And so when sometimes I know again I might be a little bit hyperbolic here, but sometimes it feels like, and that's the other thing, like, and most people probably don't even realize this, but with like our polygon budgets and our texture budgets, sometimes they're very low compared to even what the default has. Or you'll look at a custom courier or a custom arcana, like, it's got custom materials, it looks really cool, like we can't change those things, or it has like 3 times more polygons, or it's able to look fancy. Like we can't really, it's almost like, I feel like I'm making like the dollar store version of something that's really cool. And so it's like I sometimes I feel like it's hard to try to hit that level. And like if you really try to push your design, sometimes it looks a little bit like you overstretched your resources. Like I just made a Queen of Pain set for the aquatic Call to Arms, and I really wanted to do something crazy with the back slot because she has like, so many sets of like demon angel-y wings already. I just didn't want to do another one, so I wanted to give her like all these tentacles and the pants and everything else, like so much stuff that was covering her default stuff, but trying to fit that in a limited amount of polygons. And then add in the fact that with the new with Source 2, like when you actually go and you load up the character, you see it not just from the top down perspective, but you see it really up close and way closer than you used to see things. So it really highlights like everything that was really like Dota low poly about it. And so you're just like, I mean, you can still pull off some really cool stuff, and like I try not to ever let like existing items influence what I would design, but sometimes when it's kind of hard to like completely put it aside.
Let me ask you, you mentioned Arcanas and how it's sort of hard to compete with the polygon counts there. Who makes Arcanas? Is that something they pull out of the workshop, or is that a contract, or how does that sort of happen?
To my knowledge, those are all Valve made. I mean, even couriers these days tend to be mostly coming from Valve. Okay. But yeah, no, that's all on their side.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this then, and this is I'm just curious as your opinion, as somebody who's worked in it. With the Valve sort of taking control of couriers and arcanas and the hyper rares, if you will, the one that I buy 6,000 chests so that I get the hyper rare. With them taking control of that, and there not being a ton of slots left to design. I mean, sure, you get a new hero every year, but there's what? I don't even think there's slots on Monkey King at this point, or a couple. I don't play him, so I don't know. But so you only get so many slots on a new hero or sets that are going to appeal to him. Is there a point where the Dota workshop specifically just sort of becomes obsolete?
Well, I think it really depends on how I think this is something that should be like not necessarily collaboration between Valve and the workshop artists, but how Valve goes about implementing the chests or the sets rather that they add. Like I think there's things that they can do to make stuff cooler. Like something that they actually have taken a couple steps I think that really go in the right direction. Like maybe so I think it was the last fall. We had this like Storm Spirit set where it's like he's like a Spanish like kind of like it's like he's like super suave with a rose in his mouth. They did something really cool where they added the particle effect for us to make it, and I think it wasn't like super rare, but it was like the next rare down. But like little things like that can kind of like give it a little zestiness, So it's not just like another set that people will go, oh well, I have something cooler from a couple years ago already. So like maybe just targeting a few things here and there to like give people something to get excited about that's like that feels kind of unique, and sort of just mixing that in and they're kind of they seem to be kind of doing that. But yeah, of course, I mean, another thing is when you only have a few chests per year and if everyone's piling on the new hero, it's like when's the next time you're going to see another set for that hero? So I mean, maybe the slower release will lead to like less cosmetics for the new heroes, which in turn might extend the life. I don't know.
Well, you even said that, I think, in an interview, you had a ton of sets going out before TI4, and then post TI4, was it TI4? Actually, I think it was TI5. Post TI5, it was like a year and a half where you sort of didn't have any set buys.
Yeah, I just got really unlucky, I think.
Okay.
I don't know. Like, I don't, I mean, another thing that happens is the people who work on Dota and the people who choose the sets, it changes over
Right.
time, and maybe they like different things. Like for me, it felt we kind of have to chase like what we think that they're looking for. Like for a while, it seemed like they were picking things that were very standard, like don't stray too far because they're
Right.
still early on, and then you had to go a little crazy with things, and then you kind of reined it back again. And sometimes you make stuff and you kind of think this is what people are wanting right now, and then you have to wait like how many
Right.
months to see if you actually get something in, and maybe you just spend a lot of time making things that's not really what they're looking for. Those aren't the
So-
heroes that they want, so it's kind of a gamble.
As an example, like one of the sets during that year and a half maybe didn't get picked up. What would be an average hour level that you would have put into designing that set that just sort of languished in the workshop?
I don't really keep exact count of the amount of hours that I spend, but just to give you a rough estimate, maybe if I'm working full time, if it was like me and Wes, I mean, we'd probably get a set out in about 3.5 weeks.
Jesus.
From concept to finish. A courier, I guess, in around about that time. And it really depends on the number of items on that hero. Like if
Right.
it's someone simple like Enchantress, or someone who only has like Puck, who only has like
Right.
3 items, that's completely different than having to design like a mount from the ground up.
Right.
So it
It-
kind
but-
of depends, but it can take anywhere from like, I mean, there's ways to do things faster now, and I've found quicker ways of making things, and there's some tools that have come out that have, it's a faster like workflow, but
Gotcha. But it's still not a small amount of hours. It's not like
we don't
something you
want to
just
like,
whip together.
it's like even the idea, like, is it better to try to just put out a lot of quantity, or do we just make a few things and really focus? Like that's kind of what I try to do, is I try to make
Right.
like the highest quality in the shortest amount of time possible, which just means that I don't really sleep a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a little rough there for a while, because I just felt like I'm not making what
Yeah.
what they want anymore. Like, what am I doing? You don't really know what you're doing wrong. You don't know if
Right.
you're just not getting lucky, or if you're just not hitting the mark with like what they like anymore.
Well, and that sort of, it seems like, and I could be wrong, but it seems to me like that sort of moved you towards exploring CSGO a little bit more. You had the Tsunami Galil, I believe, was in the game. I think didn't you just get like a set that was in the new chest that just came out? Or
Yeah,
something
I got
like that?
2. Yeah, I
Okay.
have 2 now.
That's pretty cool. So you've got skins in CSGO, which is an insane skin market. I started playing CSGO a couple months ago and was flabbergasted at
Right?
like resell, and I was like, it's just paint on a gun, for crying out loud, people. But they CSGO loves this stuff.
Yeah.
Have you seen?
It's nice to see that kind of enthusiasm.
It really is, though. And have you seen Dota 2 designers or other workshop designers from different games sort of migrating to CSGO more aggressively because of how the market's hungry for designs versus Dota 2 seems to be slowing down a lot?
A little. A few people definitely have. I mean, there were a few people who even before me, like just made the break from Dota and decided to switch to CS:GO. Personally, I kind of wish that I had done that about 2 years ago myself, rather than going through the 1.5 year period of sadness that I endured. But
No, I'm sorry.
It's just that Dota, personally, like I really do like making Counter-Strike skins. I think there's a lot of it's just a different
Right.
it's a different process, and it's a different type of art style. It's a different type of art making, and like personally, like I think a lot of people just like doing 3D art, and like you get to do more. Like you get to be involved in more of like game art when you're doing Dota items. So I think maybe it kind of turned, like some people may not be as like enthusiastic about making skins for CS:GO because of the style difference and the fact that you're more focusing on the 2D aspect. And I think they just added normal map support, but for a few of the skin types. But before that, it's like just a diffused texture. Either you do, I mean, you can model like details and do like a sci-fi gun and bake it down, or you could just
Right.
make some patterns or do a custom paint job, but that's all there is. So I mean, so maybe some people just would rather do Dota more for the artistic fulfillment, but then again, other people may be really into illustration, and CS:GO is right up their alley. So it just depends.
Fair enough. Well, that said, though, this is an artist. We haven't used her Twitter name, which I should say is Chemical Aaliyah, by the way, if you're looking for her art signature, or digital art signature. I heard you got the name because your mom just was like arbitrarily told you to put chemical on the front of your middle name or something like that, which I think is pretty hilarious. So yep. She's not a biochemist. She doesn't make meth or anything. That's not why chemical's on there. That said, though, you've got stuff in more than one game. We've got a ton of Team Fortress, a ton of Dota 2, now CS:GO. I saw Borderlands 2. I think you were designing stuff for as well.
Oh yeah, no, I worked at
when you were working there.
Here,
that makes sense.
That was like my job, and I worked at id before that.
Okay,
and that was my internship, kind of like getting into the industry.
So, as somebody with this pedigree who's put things into so many different workshops, we're wrapping up on time here. Is there any final thoughts? Any sort of warnings to those of us who are just casual consumers, or awareness that we should have in terms of where the workshop is and where you think that's going to take Dota 2 or anything of that sort?
Well, I mean, overall, I really, 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 really hope that that things get a little easier for the artists, I guess. I don't want to see people like, deciding that it's no longer a good bet to make stuff for Dota, or that it's not profitable enough to, to keep doing it. And I mean, if things were to improve a little bit, I'd come right back. It's just that it's just really hard for me right now to make that work. But I still, like I said, I still think that there's plenty of potential there, and you just have to find different ways. And maybe they're just in sort of like a weird spot, like where you're trying to find ways to monetize things as best as possible, but also keep people interested. And maybe someone will come up with a great idea that'll give us sort of breathe some life into the workshop. And I'd like to see that. So I mean, another thing that would really help is just if you follow your favorite artists and tell them that you think that they're cool. Yeah. and encourage them to stay. And I think that's something that we haven't, it's always nice to hear from the community.
Yeah. Let them know about the sets on the workshop. Talk about it. Let Valve know that the people still want to buy items, and they want to buy them from, I think, independent creators as well, is something that speaks well. Something that I always thought, like, this used to be a thing, but like we don't get credit. This is in Counter-Strike, but not in Dota. We don't get our names on the sets anymore, like in the store. Like, so it's really hard, I think, for people to follow us. Like, they don't really know who made what set. So it's like I said, you don't really know who these people are anymore. And I really miss that. Like, I wish there was a way that we could be more in touch with the community, and I think that would help things. And then people could, sort of support their artists that they like. And, maybe we'll start to see more like just one-off chests that aren't, tied into majors. I don't know how that would work, with their revenue model or anything, but I would certainly be down for seeing more of that in the future. But we'll just have to see how it goes. And absolutely. Well, you heard it, guys. If Valve is able to make it more accessible for the artists, it sounds like there's a lot that want to come back. It looks like it's a lot of fun to design. If I was an artist, I would love making stuff for the game because of the lore history and the background. I mean, literally, we've got lore, and I probably shouldn't, we're not supposed to talk about Blizzard or all, but I mean, this is like, there's just so much background to all of these characters that feed into it. Yeah, so it's so much fun. As an actor who's a different style of art, anytime that you have a project that has a lot of backstory, historical characters, for instance, it's a ton of fun to work on, and I'm sure that Dota is very similar. That said, Shaylin, I really appreciate you stopping by tonight. Thank you so much. A big shout out, guys, if you would like to follow her and see what she's designing next, it's at Chemical Aaliyah. Aaliyah is spelled Aelia. And you can chemical spelt like a chemical, so that's not too much rocket science there. But definitely follow her, check out the sets. I think you've got any other plugs that you want to throw out there before we move on to our next segment?
That's pretty much it. I mean, ShaylinHam.com is my portfolio, but I don't know when the last time I updated that was, so
fair enough.
Check it out at your own risk.
All right, so check it out at your own risk. There might be some kooky stuff there, like quotes about grade school compatriots that are in jail. You never really know. That said, Shaylin, thank you for stopping by. I'm going to say goodbye to you, and we'll hop into the next segment. Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Have a good one.
All right, guys. So that was Shaylin. It was good to have her here. We had a lot of fun there. That said, though, we're going to move into our next segment. But before I do want to give a little bit of a comment here. Is you guys were sort of talking in Twitch chat about independent artists. Do they want to keep them? And I think that's what it comes down to. Do we, as buyers, want to see independent creators like Shaylin continue in the game, or do we want to see Valve in-house and sort of contract things like we're seeing with Arcanas? And I think that's really what it comes down to, is communicating, talking about it, following them, is how Valve will see it. In the same way that, for instance, Coddle Guy wasn't invited to TI, I think it was last year or the year before, and Reddit went bananas about it and said, hey, he deserves to be here. You know, Valve listens. They like to know what the fans want to know. So if that's something that you like, talk to them about it. That's it, guys. We're going to end every show going forward with something that I used to do once upon a time, but haven't been able to do for a long time because I couldn't find a way to do it that made me feel like I was doing it ethically. To be clear with everybody, I've had a lot of offers from different betting sites to work with the show, etc. That said, Unicorn approached me because they know that I used to love betting on Dota 2 before I was a personality. I don't do it now because I don't think that it's ethical to have inside information and actually gamble real money. But they said, we have a really cool site where we want to support the community. We want to give you a chance to sort of come along with what you're playing or watching to make it a little bit more fun. And so that's what they do. Is I've got play coins over on Unicorn that I am going to do my game pick of the week because I have a ton of fun doing that and putting it together. So this week, guys, I have chosen the game that will start, I think, in about 11 hours, and it's going to be Virtus Pro versus Team Empire as my game of the week. You might be saying, why? Virtus Pro is wicked favored to the point where it's 120 versus 440. Well, I also figured out, in my opinion, Virtus Pro sweeps the games, probably takes it in just straight up 2. And so if I do that and I put my bet on Virtus Pro doing it in 2 games, it's actually almost a 2x return. So that's what we're going to do. I think that is going to make it a lot more fun for me to watch the match, and actually really easy to do on this site. So if you guys are interested in playing with me, I would love to chat with you about our sort of our play money wagers going forward. You can go to Unicorn. You can sign up for, like, I think 200 free play coins. If you type Chemical Aaliyah Special into the promo, our guest tonight, you get an extra 100 coins, I believe. And if you type in the promo code for Toffees, which is Toffees Gift, you get another couple hundred. So you can really sort of start in style and just have fun. Tweet at me. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know if my picks worked. I guess I'll find out too. But yeah, I'm definitely going Virtus Pro over Team Empire, and I think that they're going to take it in 2. Virtus Pro has just been bananas amazing lately. So much so that I am working my butt off to try and get them on the show once they finally have their schedule slow down. So if you do like that idea, tweet at them. Tell them, hey, talk to Toffees. He wants to hear all about what's been going on with Virtus Pro and why their form has been so fire lately. Guys, thank you for watching. My name is Toffees. As always, you can find me at Toffees TV or right here on twitch.tv/Toffees TV. You can also check us out on YouTube at 5 Midas Gaming, or of course the podcast is on iTunes, Stitcher, and everywhere else. All you have to do is type coffee.w/Toffees, and you can find all the podcasts that we release here on the network. It has been wonderful spending the evening with you guys. A big shout out to the viewers. Again, thank you to Shaylin for coming on at Chemical Aaliyah as our guest to talk about the workshop here this evening. And a thank you to Razer for making all of the equipment that we're playing on, Ace Republica Gamers for the stuff inside of the computer, and of course, last but not least, Unicorn, a betting site committed to building the community as well as doing it ethically. So if you do want to gamble, or at least do some play gambling to make the games feel a little more fun to watch, totally understand. I kind of love doing that too. They are the place to check out and do it. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks for hanging out. And as always, Toffees out.